Alright everyone, it's Sunday again and it's time for our third Stanley Cup Playoff recap right here, right now. Alright, so we got 4 matchups here in round 2 and they're well underway. It's been very good hockey from all these 4 matchups. We're also going to be recapping Toronto and Montreal because I didn't get to that last week. I didn't finish recapping Game 7 yet, so we're gonna do that. I know it's a little bit of old news, but yeah, alright. Before we do get started today, I would like to remember the 215 Indigenous children that never made it home. This week, there were some very tragic discoveries of Indigenous children being treated very horribly, killed in their Indigenous school. And that's another part of our dark history. As a country and in the hockey world, we also grieve. Every child matters, and I do hope that change is on their way and that this kind of thing does not happen again. Very unacceptable stuff right here. And today and every day, we think of these children and their families, their loved ones, the Indigenous community who is grieving for these poor, poor children. Alright, so this week we had a lot of nominations for the NHL awards. I think the Vezina Candidates, are the biggest ones so far. I'll keep going along with these award nominations probably next week, but for now, I'm just going to go over the Vezina Candidates, and that's Marc-Andre Fleury, Grubauer, Vasilevsky. Suspensions now, we have Ryan Reaves, who was suspended for 2 games for his roughing and sportsmanlike conduct on Ryan Graves. That did trigger a lot of discussion in the hockey community, and I do think that it was a tough play, bad play, just very unnecessary by Ryan Reaves. Another suspension we had was the Mark Scheifele one. He got suspended for 4 games against Jake Evans in Game 1 of the Montreal-Winnipeg series. Comments for that were that it was a little excessive, but I think the injury makes it so this suspension was longer. But there was, I believe, a little bit of an intent to injure, probably in Scheifele's frustration. So unfortunately, Winnipeg will be without their star player for 4 games. Alright, so Toronto-Montreal. As you know, this series went to Montreal in 7 games. Very unfortunate for Toronto, and the choking mentality continues. We just can't explain it anymore. Offense dried up, stars, players dried up. Looked like only William Nylander, maybe Spezza and Thornton. Kerfoot was really playing well. Otherwise, it looked rather difficult for Toronto. Okay, so power play for Toronto, 13%. Not very good at all. Montreal, they started really bad on the power play. I believe they didn't score a single power play goal in the first 4 games. But they did end up going 15.8% in the series. Penalty kill for Toronto, 84.2%. Montreal, 87%. For Toronto, William Nylander hit 5 goals and 8 points. Looked like the only Leaf that showed up. Kerfoot had 6 points, and Jason Spezza had 5 points. So pretty good for these 3 players, but the point totals really drop off after that. For Montreal, Tyler Toffoli with 5 points, Nick Suzuki, Corey Perry, Joel Armia each of 4 points. Goaltending, Jack Campbell, 3 and 4, 1.81 goals and stat average, 934 save percentage. I know people might blame him for that Game 7, but I assure you that Jack Campbell was not the reason why Toronto could not win this series. And Carey Price, in those last 3 games, really turned into playoff Carey Price and shut the door. He didn't get better numbers than Jack Campbell in the series, but he played very well. In Game 1, it was 2-1 for Montreal, his first playoff meeting since 1979. Price versus Campbell. Sorry about that. Price versus Campbell in net. Gallagher and Weber were in. John Tavares was hurt after Perry accidentally tripped over his head. He had to go to hospital with a concussion. Foligno and Perry had a fight afterward. Josh Anderson scored for Montreal. Evans was injured. 3rd delay of game penalty for Toronto in the 3rd period. Paul Byron's shorthanded goal was the game winner. No power play goals scored. In Game 2, 5-1 for Toronto. Kotkaniemi opened the scoring. Spezza tied the game. 4 straight power plays in the second for Toronto, about 10 minutes. Matthews scored. Dean scored his first playoff goal in the power play. An unsuccessful goaltender interference challenge afterward. Shots are 20-6 for Toronto in the second. Nylander with a power play goal in the third. Kerfoot with the empty netter. First win for Jack Campbell in the playoffs. And first win for the Leafs against the Habs in the playoffs in 19,744 days. 54 years. In Game 3, 2-1 for Toronto. Nick Foligno was out. Cole Caulfield is in for the Habs. Early double-minor power play for them, but no shots on it. Just a Caulfield crossbar. 3rd power play, also no shots. Price with an insane paddle save. Arturi Lehkonen was injured after a collision. Nylander scored 3rd straight game of the goal. Nick Suzuki scored later. Riley scores late in the second. Shots were 15-2 for Montreal in the 3rd, but the Leafs hold on. Game 4, 4-0 for Toronto. Foligno was out. Dermott and Brooks was in for Sandin and Nash. Stahl in for Lehkonen. Spezza denied by Price on a breakaway early. Nylander hits his 4th straight playoff goal. Spezza, Thornton score. Galchenyuk scores the empty netter. 3 points for him. Campbell, 32 save shutout. In Game 5, 4-3 for Montreal in overtime. Simmons, early post. Armia scored 2 goals early in the first. Kotkaniemi scores early in the second. Hyman responds on a greasy goal. Big saves for Price in the third. 6 shots in the first 3 minutes for Toronto. Muzzin scored after a power play ended to make it 3-2. Scored again for a second of the game to tie it, but Suzuki scores on a 2-0, 59 seconds into overtime. So that was a 3-2 series lead, and Game 6 was 3-2 for Montreal in overtime. There were fans in the building for the Habs. Nick Foligno and Evans were in. Thomas Tatar was out. 6 shots for Montreal in the first 2 minutes, 10 shots in the first 5. No shots in the first 2 power plays for the Leafs, scoreless after 2 periods. Perry scores a greasy goal. Challenged by Toronto but unsuccessful. Marner, the delay of game penalty, and Toffoli scored on a 5-on-3. Spezza and Brody scored in 5 minutes and 14 seconds apart to tie the game. Muzzin was injured. Leafs outshot the Canadiens 13-2 in the overtime, but Kotkaniemi gets the overtime winner. And we got another Game 7. And here we go. Game 7, 3-1 for Montreal. 550 healthcare workers as fans for Toronto. Stingy game to start. Gallagher gets the opening goal. Perry power play goal. Leafs failed in 2 power plays in the third. Toffoli with empty netter. Nylander broke the shutout with 1:36 left. The Habs advanced to the second round, and the Leafs are cursed. Kind of feel for Steve Dangle, who has been a diehard Leaf fan for basically all his life, and he doesn't deserve this. And as you see all the experts there, none of them said the Habs will win the series. I know some of you guys probably actually predicted Habs in 7 because you had that faith that Toronto would choke it away again. And yeah, we didn't expect it to happen again, not in the hands of Montreal at least. But there's some kind of darkness, some bad losing mentality in Toronto. And yes, the blame goes on the players, it goes maybe on the coach as well. It also goes on Kyle Dubas. Can't win in this league with just a regular season team. You could be first in the division every time, but they're not a playoff team. They're really not. They really need... And actually, I can't even really blame the core here. Their core is talented, but they just don't have what it takes to close out a series. That is something that has to change. I know Nazem Kadri in Toronto and all those other eras, Phil Kessel, all these eras of Toronto Maple Leafs, none of them have worked. And this new era with Matthews and Marner and Nylander and Morgan Riley still here, all these players, adding Joe Thornton and Jason Spezza, even that couldn't save their curse and break their curse. It's just not there. Well, Montreal moves on. I'll recap Montreal's series against Winnipeg in a little bit. Now let's move on to the next series. Alright, so Boston and New York. Series is a 2-2 tie as of Saturday's game. Power play for Boston, 32.1%. New York Islanders, 22.2%. Penalty killing for Boston, 81.3%. The Islanders, 66.7%. It's a little bit low for the Islanders, and they will need to improve that in the final few games of this series. For Boston, Pastrnak, 11 points. Marchand, 8 points. Bergeron, 8 points. For the Islanders, Pajot, 8 points. No, 10 points, sorry. Pajot with 10 points. Beauvillier, 9 points. Palmieri, 7 points. Goaltending, Tuukka Rask, .935 save percentage, 6-3. He's been great for Boston, as usual. For the Islanders, Sorokin, he played in the first game, and the first game only in this series. .934 save percentage. He was good in the first round. Difficult game in the second round in game 1. For Lamov, he's 2-1 in the series so far. .929 save percentage. Pretty good performance from him as well. Game 1, 5-2 for Boston. Sorokin and Rask started. Beauvillier scored in the power play, but Pastrnak scores with 24 seconds left in the first. Shots are 18-8 for Boston in the first. Pastrnak scored in the second. Pelech responded 1:26 later. McAvoy scored. Pastrnak with a hat trick. Taylor Hall empty netter in the third. Shots are 40-22 for Boston. So a great first game. But as we see often with the New York Islanders, they don't go away. And they won 4-3 in overtime in game 2 with Varlamov starting the game. Coyle scored 2:38 in. Bailey, Palmieri, and Pajot scored in the second. But Bergeron and Marchand stormed back to tie in the third. Cizikas with the overtime winner off a bad turnover by Lauzon. So, series was tied at that point. Game 3, 2-1 for Boston in overtime again. Varlamov started the game again. Smith scored early. No goals until Barzal scored with 5:26 left in the third. Late power play for the Islanders killed off. Shots are 21-9 for Boston in the third. But only the Islanders got a goal in the third. Marchand with the overtime winner with a wrister top corner on Varlamov. I think a goal that Varlamov didn't expect to go in. The Islanders didn't expect to go in, but Varlamov played a great game nonetheless. So game 4, the most recent game, 4-1 for the Islanders. Varlamov starting the game. Mayfield and Hall fought in the first period, lost scrums, and then Martin and Tenorti also fight. Pastrnak, he's going to ruin this missed chance. He missed the wide open net and hit the post. I'm sure the GIFs are all around social media already. Krejci scored first against the Isles. and his first goal since October 23rd in 2015 against the Islanders. Goaltender interference challenge was unsuccessful, but the Bruins didn't score in the ensuing power play. Palmieri then tied the game. Krejci had a review for a major penalty for spearing. It was rescinded to a slashing minor. That might be a little controversial. Barzal gets the go-ahead goal with 6:57 left, 2 empty netters. I think a lot of people sleep on the Islanders, and they don't go away. They're truly a tough one to predict because they're always in the series. They do not go away. They don't lose 2 straight games. They know how to respond. They know how to get timely goals. And for sure, the Islanders played a good game in Game 2 and Game 4. If the Islanders end up getting the lead in the series, I expect them to win. They're not a team that would choke away a lead in a series. Boston, they need to keep going, getting the offense going, and trying to solve for Varlamov, who's been pretty excellent. Alright, so don't sleep on this series. It's an exciting one. Alright, so now let's move on to the next one. Alright, Colorado and Vegas. So, as of Friday's game, as of Game 3, it is 2-1 for Colorado in this series. It's been a very offensive series, not really in scoring, but in scoring chances. It's been very exciting to watch the 2 top teams in the league go against each other because it has not disappointed at all. So, power play for Colorado, 44%. It did drop off from the 50% that it was after round 1, but still a very good power play, albeit the Golden Knights have done a decent job at handling the penalty kill. Vegas 13.6% on the power play. That needs to improve if they're going to come back in this series. Penalty killing for Colorado 81.3%. Vegas 70.8%. That also needs to improve because Colorado, they're scoring power play goals every game, even though they are killing maybe 3 or 4 or 4 or 5 power plays every game. That, if they can shut that down even further, that'd be great. For Colorado, top 3 point getters, Nathan MacKinnon with 13 points in 7 games, I believe. So 8 goals in 7 games. Wow. Landeskog 12 points and Rantanen 11 points. The entire first line just amazing. But the Golden Knights, I think, did a solid job at handling that in Game 3. For Vegas, Stone with 6 points and Janmark and Carlson with 6 points. They haven't scored a whole lot, so the point totals aren't that high. Goaltending, Grubauer, 6-1, 1.86 goals against average, 941 save percentage. Very Vezina caliber goaltending by Philip Grubauer. And even in the loss in Game 3, he played amazing. And he's giving Colorado a chance to win every night, even though, honestly, I think Vegas has played better in Games 2 and 3. Fleury, 5-4, 1.88 goals against average, 922 save percentage. He's doing very well as well, but the challenge is that he's not facing a lot of shots. But he is still allowing 2 goals, 3 goals-ish. So, it's a lot to ask for a goaltender, but Fleury needs to be lights out in order to have a chance at winning the series. Robin Lehner played game 1 in this series. Not a good game for him, but I don't think he's to blame, to be honest. It's a very questionable decision by Pierre DeBoer, but I know that giving Fleury the rest might be a good idea as well, because we're starting to see those rewards coming in for that move, because they did win Game 3. That said, there are a lot of what-ifs. If they started Fleury in Game 1, what would have happened? We don't know. Alright, so game summaries here. Game 1, 7-1 for Colorado. Robin Lehner started. Rantanen with backhand goal early. Landeskog scored. Great start from the Avs. Saad and McKinnon scored to make it 4-0. Janmark was hurt after a Graves hit. Carrier takes penalties by going after Graves. And that cannot happen. It's just careless penalties. If you're going to take a penalty, make sure the other guy you're going after also takes a penalty. So that's a 4-on-4 or a 5-minute major for fighting. Don't just be the only one taking the penalty for interference or for roughing. Landeskog scored after. Carlson responded 36 seconds later for a 5-1 game. McKinnon with an absolutely filthy highlight reel goal to make it 6-1. A match penalty was given to Ryan Reeves for intent to injure against Ryan Graves. A 9-minute power play for the Avs. Cale Makar scores on that 9-minute power play. Pure domination by the Avalanche in Game 1. That would not be the case in the next 2 games. But we didn't expect Vegas to come back that well. And they did. Game 2. 3-2 Colorado in overtime. Janmark and Reeves were out for Vegas. Early goal for Avs. Saad with a 5-hole goal. Martinez ties it, but Joe scores on the power play after in the first. So Vegas had 4 penalties in the first, but they kept it a 1-goal game. Riley Smith tied the game in the second. Shots were 15-6 for Vegas in the second and third period. 40 shots in regulation for Vegas. Smith took a penalty in overtime for slashing, a little controversial there. Rantanen scored the overtime winner. And it's the first Avalanche wins that's under a 3-goal difference. So, Vegas did a really good job in Game 2, but to be honest, I think Colorado steals the game. Vegas, I think, did deserve a better fate in Game 2, but Philip Grubauer, being an amazing goaltender he is, he gave Colorado a chance to win, stole the game. Game 3, 3-2 for Vegas. First 100% capacity crowd in the playoffs with 17,504 people in the stands. I love that atmosphere, and it's something they've definitely missed. Insane saves like Grubauer in the first, with shots being 15-3 for Vegas, but a scoreless game. Carlson opened the score in the second, but Soderberg tied it 1:29 later. And that just felt demoralizing for Vegas when that happens to them. Rantanen scores early in the third, giving Colorado the lead. But Marchessault and Pacioretty score 45 seconds apart for the lead. Fleury with big saves late, but what a game. Shots were 43-20 for Vegas. And yes, they deserve to win. Grubauer held the minute for as long as he could. But Vegas, with their crowd backing them, they got the job done. That was a must-win, and they got it done. What a game that was. And this series is going to be a good one. I'm going to look forward to a very feisty Game 4 here. Alright? Let's see what Vegas can do. What Colorado can do. Let's move on to the next series. Alright, Carolina and Tampa. So the series is 3-1 for Tampa as of Saturday night. Power play for Carolina, 20%. Tampa, 41.2%. Their power play has been lethal, and it has continued to be just that way. Penalty count for Carolina, 77.5%. Tampa, 75.8%. Top 3 pointers for Carolina, Sebastian Aho, 11 points. Jordan Staal with 8 points, and Svechnikov with 8 points. For Tampa Bay, Nikita Kucherov with 17 points. Leading the league right now. Steven Stamkos at 13 points and Braden Point 11. Goaltending. Alex Nedeljkovic 4-4, 920 save percentage. He played the first 2 games and he honestly played pretty well. But they did play Peter Mrazek in games 3 and 4. He is 1-1, 873 save percentage. Hit a 1.3. Game 4 was just chaos. Vasilevsky 7-3, 928 save percentage. Numbers aren't as good as previous playoff runs, but make no mistake, Vasilevsky is still playing exceptionally well. Game 1, 2-1 for Tampa. Savard was out, lots of great chances for the Canes in the first. The crowd was into it. Point scores on the power play to open the scoring. Bean scores to tie early in the third. Goudreau sneaks one by Nedeljkovic's legs from a sharp angle with 7:21 left in the third. Hedman with a big block with 6 seconds left to let the Lightning hang on. In Game 2, 2-1 for Tampa as well. Stingy first period. Killorn scores a sneaky low shot in the second. Shots are 21-11 for Carolina after 2. Trocheck injured after collision with Fogle. And Svechnikov scored in 1.5 left. But Tampa able to hold on with a 2-1 game. Game 3, 3-2 for Carolina in overtime. Mrazek started. That was a nice change of scenery there in the Carolina side of things. Scoreless in the first period. Pesce and Aho scored for the Canes, but 2 straight power play goals by Point and Killorn tied the game. There's a lot of questionable icing, offside calls, so the coaches were not riled up at the officiating per se, but more on the linesmen. And also, this was the 20th overtime game in the playoffs. Insane how many overtime games there have been. Aho, the overtime winner on the power play. In Game 4, 6-4 for Tampa. A little uncharacteristic of the scoring in the first 3 games. Mrazek started for Carolina again. There were offsetting penalties before the game started. Brady Shea, this is a funny little moment here. He thought he had a high sticking penalty. The refs didn't call it, but he went to the box anyway. And that just puts the refs in such a weird position, and it felt bad for them when the refs got yelled at by John Cooper. What a hilarious moment. Brayden Point opened the scoring on a great pass. Early power play for Tampa in the second, but Canes killed it off and scored twice in 39 seconds for the lead. Teravainen and Fast with the goals. Stamkos scored on the second shot of the period for Tampa in the power play. 9:54 into the second. Hamilton's responded to the goal 41 seconds after for a 3-2 lead. Slavin scored 2:06 after on a tough angle. Vasilevsky had allowed 4 goals on 17 shots. It looked great for Carolina in this game, and in this game, they played one of the best half of a period that we could have seen in the playoffs. And if they held on here, it would have been amazing. But Tampa Bay, doing their mojos. Kucherov scored after on the power play. Johnson scored 2:32 later to tie the game. Stamkos scores on a 6th power play for a 5-4 lead. With 22 seconds left in the second period, there were 8 goals in the second period in a 15 minutes and 7 second span. Kucherov scored in the third. Tampa Bay 3 for 6 on the power play, and then Carolina really beat themselves up over this one. With all the penalties they've taken, they need to be more disciplined if they want to have a chance to come back in this series. Tampa is doing a great job of taking advantage of opportunities, even when they're being outplayed. They're able to do that. Carolina, on the other end, they've allowed the first goal in 8 of 10 games so far in the playoffs, and they've shown that they have the grit to come back in games, but trailing the game all the time does not help a team win championships. They trailed a lot against Nashville, but they were able to win that in 6. They've trailed a lot against Tampa. They've come back. They only scored the first goal in Game 3, and they won that one overtime. Well, Carolina has an uphill battle to climb here, and we'll see what happens. It's been a pretty exciting series. It's getting a little bit more chippy as well. I'm excited to see more of it. Alright, Game 5 is on Tuesday for this series. Now let's move on to the last series of the day. Alright, Winnipeg, Montreal, the North Division matchup here. Series is 2-0 for Montreal. It's a little unexpected there. Power play for Winnipeg, 20%. Montreal, 16.7%. Winnipeg, 81.3% on the penalty kill. Montreal, 89.3%. First in the league. They're doing great. Top 3 point getters for Winnipeg. Kyle Connor with 5 points. Scheifele and Wheeler with 5 points as well. For Montreal, Toffoli with 7 points. Eric Stahl with 6 points. Nick Suzuki with 5 points. Goaltending Hellebuck, 4-2. 940 save percentage. And Carey Price, a 935 save percentage. Game 1, 5-3 for Montreal. The Habs scored an early goal. Kotkaniemi and Stahl getting the goals. Lowry with a shorthanded goal. Then Suzuki scored late in the first. Forbert and Gallagher with goals in the third. And Connor scored at 1:42 left. But Evans scores an empty netter. Scheifele injured him with a high hit. Controversy here, and Scheifele ended up getting suspended for 4 games. He thought that was a little excessive because he thought it was a clean hit probably. I think that's not the main point here. The main point is Evans was vulnerable and there was a little bit of an intent to injure and some frustration boiling from Scheifele. Not going to discuss this much further, but whatever we do, just don't go after Scheifele's family. They have nothing to do with what happened in the game. So if you're going to criticize, just criticize the player. Don't criticize anyone related to him because that's not fair, is it? Game 2, 1-0 Montreal. Scheifele was out for suspension. DeMello was out. Ben was in. Evans was out. Lehkonen was in for Montreal. Toffoli with a shorthanded goal in the first. That was the game winner right there. Low event game. Pionk, great skate save in the last minute. Late chance for Connor by Price with a 30-save shutout. Very low event game, and that's a good game by Montreal. Just hanging in there. Winnipeg with 30 shots. Yeah, Carey Price doing very well here to keep Winnipeg at bay, and Montreal wins both games in Winnipeg. And now they head back home for game 3 and 4, and you have to wonder if they just win one of those 2 games, they're in a very good shape. There's not much to say about this series so far, except for the Scheifele suspension. It's not the most interesting series, that's for sure, but we'll see if it gets any more interesting in games 3 and 4 and beyond. Alright. Okay, let's quickly recap the injuries. In the Colorado and Vegas series, Johnson and Francouz injured for Colorado. That was a long-term injury, so it doesn't really affect them very much. For Vegas, Nosek, McNabb, and Janmark are off the team right now. McNabb out on COVID protocol. He hasn't been in for a while. In the Boston and Islanders series, Miller and Carlo out for Boston. Delco and Wallstrom out for the Islanders. From the Carolina and Tampa series, Niederreiter and Trocheck are injured for Carolina. In the North, Stastny out for Winnipeg. Jake Evans out for Montreal. I may have missed some injuries here, but these are the notable ones in my opinion. I didn't really check. Kind of going off the top of my head here, but these are the ones that I found. Okay, some takeaways from this week. First, some stats here. 28 of 58 games so far were 1-goal games, so pretty close. 20 out of 58 games so far and went to overtime, so more than a third of the games that went to OT. It's been a pretty close playoff run for a lot of teams. A lot of overtime. We're getting our money's worth. The Leafs are cursed. That's all I can say. They're a good team. Colorado, what a game 1. 7-1 win. That was a great game. Hurricanes, they've allowed first goal in 8 of 10 games. We can call them the comeback kids, but they lost 6-4 against Tampa in the most recent game. We'll see what the Canes can do when they score first. They could be lethal. My round 2 predictions here, Carolina and Tampa. I had the Canes in 7. That is not looking good for me. Boston and New York, I have the Bruins in 6. That's still intact, but honestly, that doesn't look good for me either. Colorado and Vegas, I have the Avs in 6. That could still happen. Winnipeg and Montreal, I have the Jets in 6, which does not look good for me either. Predictions have been tough for me. And alright, that will do it for this week's recap. We'll see you next week on June 13th to continue on trucking here with the second round. We'll see if the series ends by next week. I think they do. So we'll recap what happened in round 2 and we'll preview the 2 matchups in the third round as well. So still a lot of hockey left. I think still at least a month left of hockey, so We're still trucking along here into the summer. I do love the fans in the stands. It's made watching hockey a very fun time. Alright, so we'll see you next time. Until then, take care everyone. Have a great rest of your weekend.